All right, welcome back, everyone. We're diving into something pretty interesting today.
Definitely.
Costco's Q1 2025 earnings call transcript from December 12th.
Ooh, Costco.
Yeah, we're going to break down the numbers, take a look at what the analysts are saying, and see what we can learn about, Costco's performance and what it might mean for, well, for all of us, really.
And I think this one is particularly interesting because of the economic backdrop, right? There's
Yeah.
all this talk about, inflation and potential port strikes.
Right.
So seeing how Costco is navigating all of that could be really insightful.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's jump right in. Costco reported a net income of $1.798 billion for Q1 2025.
Okay.
That's up from $1.589 billion last year.
Right.
And earnings per share came in at $4.04 compared to $3.58 in the same period last year.
So solid growth on the surface.
Yeah, sounds pretty good, right?
But the CFO, Gary Millerchip, he pointed out a $100 million tax benefit in those numbers.
Oh.
Yeah, it's related to stock-based compensation. So when you adjust for that, net income and earnings per share actually grew by 9.9% and 9.8% respectively.
So still growth, but maybe not quite as dramatic as those initial numbers suggested.
Exactly. It's always good to dig a little deeper. Right?
Sure. So if it's not just those one-time benefits, what's driving this growth?
Well, a big part of the story is sales.
Okay.
Net sales hit $60.99 billion.
Wow.
Yeah, a 7.5% increase year over year.
That's significant.
Right. And part of that is fueled by new warehouse openings.
Oh, right. They've been opening a lot of new locations.
Yeah, they added 7 in Q1, 4 of which were international.
I remember seeing that, yeah.
And speaking of new locations, the one they opened in Pleasanton, California, just after the quarter ended,
Oh, yeah.
it had the highest opening day sales ever for a U.S. warehouse.
Really? How much did they make?
A whopping $2.9 million on its first day.
That's incredible.
It is. And they're projecting a total of 29 openings for this fiscal year, with 10 planned outside the U.S.
So they're really focusing on expanding their global footprint.
Absolutely. It seems to be a key part of their growth strategy. But it's not just about new warehouses. Their comparable sales are also performing well.
Oh, right. Comparable sales. That's like sales at existing stores, right?
Yeah, exactly. Excluding gas deflation, U.S. comparable sales increased by 7.2%.
Okay.
Canada saw a 6.7% rise, and other international comparable sales climbed by 7.1%.
So pretty consistent growth across different regions.
Exactly. And that kind of consistency makes me think about their membership model, People are clearly still signing up.
Yeah, even with that recent membership fee increase.
Right. And membership fee income jumped by 7.8% this quarter, reaching $1.166 billion.
Yeah, okay.
But the CFO did point out that the fee increase didn't really impact these numbers because of how those fees are recognized.
So we'll have to see how that plays out in future quarters.
Right, exactly.
Right.
But it will be interesting to see, especially with the slight dip in renewal rates in the U.S. and Canada.
Oh, there was a dip.
Yeah, down 0.1% from the previous quarter.
Maybe that fee increase is starting to have an impact.
It's possible, but the CFO also mentioned that the rise in digital signups could be playing a role.
Digital signups.
Yeah, those who sign up online, they tend to have slightly lower renewal rates, apparently.
Interesting. So that's something to keep an eye on.
Absolutely. And this is where things get really interesting for me.
Oh.
The conversation shifted to changes in consumer behavior.
Oh, yeah. I was reading about that. What did they say?
Well, they talked a lot about how people are cooking more at home and dining out less.
Okay.
And that's reflected in the strong sales in their meat and produce categories.
That makes sense. I mean, with the economy the way it is, people are probably looking for ways to save money.
Exactly. And the CEO, Ron Vikras, actually said something like, "We're seeing more of a shift back to people eating at home."
Mm-hmm.
It's probably a function of people working more from home.
Yeah, that makes sense too.
Right. But it wasn't just about cooking at home. They also talked about what they called a bifurcation trend.
Bifurcation.
Yeah, it's basically a split in spending patterns among members.
Okay.
Some are opting for premium items like those fancy cuts of meat,
Ah.
while others are sticking to more budget-friendly options.
So like a tale of two Costcos.
Pretty much. And it raises the question of how Costco can cater to both those segments effectively.
Right. What are they doing with their pricing and product selection to manage that?
That's a key question for sure, and it'll be interesting to see how they navigate that moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of product categories, did you notice how well the non-food categories performed?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Double-digit growth in areas like gold jewelry, gift cards, home furnishings, even luggage.
Right. It's like People are splurging on some things while cutting back on others.
Yeah, and Richard Galanti, the CFO, said, "We're seeing continued strength in big-ticket discretionary items.
Hmm.
In fact, we saw double-digit comp sales increases in jewelry, toys, seasonal candy."
So maybe it's a combination of pent-up demand and people looking for deals in an inflationary environment.
That's a good possibility.
And of course, we can't forget about Kirkland's signature.
Oh, of course not. That brand is a powerhouse for them.
It really is.
Yeah.
They always seem to be coming up with new and interesting Kirkland products.
And it consistently outperforms the business as a whole.
There's something about that Kirkland brand, it's like a seal of approval.
Definitely. It resonates with their members, that's for sure.
Now, here's where things get really interesting for me. Costco is venturing into the world of retail media.
Retail media.
Yeah, they're running targeted off-site media campaigns for their suppliers.
Interesting. So they're using their data to help their suppliers reach specific customers.
Exactly. And early results show some promising returns.
Wow. So they're creating a whole new revenue stream.
It seems like it.
Okay.
But it'll be interesting to see how this impacts their image.
Right. Will members be okay with seeing more targeted ads?
Exactly. It's a delicate balance.
Definitely. And speaking of delicate balances, one topic that came up a few times was the potential impact of those port strikes.
Oh, right. I was wondering about that.
Analysts are worried about how it could disrupt inventory levels, especially with the holidays coming up.
Yeah, that's a valid concern. Did the executives address that?
They did. Gary Millerchip acknowledged the potential for disruption, but he said their teams are working on contingency plans. They've pulled forward some inventory purchases and are looking at alternative sourcing options.
So they're being proactive.
Yeah, taking a prepare for the worst, hope for the best approach.
Makes sense. So overall, it sounds like a pretty good quarter for Costco.
Yeah, solid growth, some interesting consumer trends, and a few potential challenges on the horizon.
And we're going to delve deeper into those challenges and potential opportunities when we take a look at the Q&A portion of the call in part 2.
Right. I'm excited to see what kind of questions the analysts had.
Me too. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll unpack those analyst questions and try to decipher what might be in store for Costco's next quarter.
Okay, so diving into the Q&A, one analyst asked about the impact of inflation on Costco's pricing strategy.
Yeah, that's top of mind for a lot of people, I'm sure. With prices going up everywhere, will Costco still be able to, keep those low prices that they're known for?
Yeah, it's a big question. And Richard Galanti, the CFO, he addressed it head on.
Okay, what did he say?
He said, inflationary factors continue, but appear to be moderating.
So some good news there, but, not out of the woods completely yet.
Right, exactly. He also talked about, pulling forward some inventory purchases to lock in prices.
Okay.
And, working closely with their suppliers to find efficiencies.
So really trying to, be strategic to protect their members from price increases as much as possible.
It seems like it's a tough balancing act, right?
For sure. Keeping prices low for members while also dealing with rising costs themselves.
Exactly. And speaking of members, there was a question about those, slightly lower membership renewal rates.
Oh, right. Yeah, I was wondering about that.
The analyst was asking, if that's a sign of price sensitivity starting to creep in.
Okay, that's a good question. What do they say?
The CFO pointed out that historically, even small fee increases have led to a little dip in renewals,
Okay.
but they tend to bounce back eventually. So, they're monitoring it closely.
It's a wait and see kind of thing.
For now, yeah. But they emphasize that they're always, evaluating their membership structure.
So maybe some changes down the road.
It's possible, but, they haven't hinted at anything specific.
Okay, fair enough. Another area that got some attention was their e-commerce performance.
Right.
It grew by 13% year over year.
Yeah, which is good, but, some analysts were wondering why it wasn't higher.
Especially compared to, some of those online giants.
Exactly. It's a competitive landscape out there. So what was their response to that?
Yeah, what did they say?
Well, they talked about the success of Costco logistics, for those large items.
Oh, right. Costco Logistics?
Yeah, they completed almost 1 million deliveries in Q1.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is. And they also mentioned their curated marketplace, Costco Next.
Costco Next, yeah.
That had record sales during, the Thanksgiving and Black Friday period.
So they're definitely making progress.
They are, but maybe not at the same pace as, some purely online retailers.
Right. It's like they're balancing their online presence with, that in-store experience.
That's a good way to put it. And they're also focused on, those omni-channel improvements.
Oh, like what?
They talked about a new prescription inventory management system and also enabling prescription delivery through Instacart.
Okay, so definitely making some moves there.
But there was one question that I found particularly interesting.
Oh, what was that?
An analyst asked why they don't have a scan and go option.
Like Sam's Club has.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a good point. It seems like a lot of retailers are moving in that direction.
Right. And Costco's response was basically, we're confident in our self-checkout and other initiatives.
So they're not feeling the pressure to jump on that bandwagon just yet.
It seems like they're taking a more measured approach.
Interesting. Okay, so
Yeah.
let's talk about Kirkland Signature.
All right, the golden goose.
It really is. They've done such a great job with that brand.
But some analysts were wondering, how they plan to keep that momentum going.
Okay, I see. With so many Kirkland products already, how do they keep it fresh and exciting?
Exactly. One analyst even asked if they're worried about Kirkland fatigue.
Kirkland fatigue, huh? I like that.
And Costco basically laughed it off,
Okay.
They're confident in the quality and value of their Kirkland products.
Then they should be. They're great products.
Right. And they emphasize that they're, very selective about which products get the Kirkland name.
So it's not just slapping the label on anything.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
about maintaining that, sense of quality and exclusivity.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, let's shift gears a bit and talk about, the global landscape.
All right, going global.
With all the uncertainty in the world right now, it's interesting to see how they're approaching international expansion.
Yeah, analysts were definitely digging into that.
What did they say?
Well, they talked about the strong performance they're seeing in markets like Japan and Taiwan.
Okay.
And they emphasized the importance of, tailoring their approach to each specific market.
So not a one-size-fits-all strategy.
Definitely not. They talked about working with local suppliers,
Right.
and offering products that resonate with local tastes.
So really trying to understand those different consumer preferences.
Exactly. It's a more nuanced approach.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay.
Now let's circle back to those potential port strikes.
All right. The looming threat.
Analysts were really concerned about, the impact on inventory, especially with the holidays coming up.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah.
And the CFO, he acknowledged that it could be a challenge,
Okay.
but he said they're doing everything they can to mitigate the risk.
So like what?
Monitoring the situation closely, working with suppliers to find alternative shipping routes,
Okay.
even considering air freighting some critical items if necessary.
So they're taking it seriously.
They are, and they really stress their commitment to making sure that members, have access to the products they need, especially during the holidays.
Good to hear. They're on top of it.
Yeah.
So anything else that stood out to you in the Q&A?
There were a few questions about acquisitions. Yeah.
Conditions, like
Yeah.
buying other companies.
Exactly. Analysts were wondering if Costco is, looking at any potential acquisitions.
To expand their reach.
Yeah, or enter new markets.
Interesting. So maybe even more growth on the horizon?
Potentially. But they were pretty vague in their response.
What'd they say?
Basically that they're, always open to opportunities, but they're very selective.
Okay, so nothing concrete, but it's something to keep an eye on.
Definitely. So overall, I think the Q&A gave us a much deeper understanding of, Costco's strategy and the challenges they're facing.
Yeah, it really added some color to those initial numbers.
Yeah, exactly. And now I think it's time to look at Costco's overall outlook and, see what kind of guidance, if any, they provided for the next quarter.
Okay, so we've gone through all the numbers we've heard, what the analysts are saying.
We've gotten a pretty good sense of, Costco's performance and their strategy.
Right. And as always, Costco doesn't give specific quarterly guidance.
Yeah, they like to keep things close to the vest.
But we can still look for, clues in their comments and the way they answered those analyst questions.
So what do you think? Any hints about what we can expect for next quarter?
Well, I definitely picked up on a, sense of cautious optimism.
Okay, what makes you say that?
Well, they talked a lot about the strength of their membership base and, the resilience of their core business.
So they're feeling good about those fundamentals.
Yeah, it seems like it. But they also acknowledged, the challenges like inflation and the possibility of those supply chain disruptions.
Right, those are still big unknowns.
Exactly. Those factors could have a real impact on, their performance in Q2. So it's kind of a mixed bag, like good things happening, but also some potential bumps in the road.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. If I had to guess, I'd say we might see continued growth, but maybe at a, slightly slower pace.
So not quite as, spectacular as Q1.
Maybe not. But
Yeah,
ultimately,
well-
we'll have to wait and see what those Q2 numbers look like.
Right, when they release their next earnings report.
Exactly. But for now, I think we've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, we've gone through the financials, we've analyzed those key discussions.
And we've even pondered the future of, the warehouse club model in this changing retail landscape.
Exactly. It's been a really interesting deep dive.
It has. And I always learn something new when we do these.
Me too. But before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about.
Okay. I like it.
Given everything we've discussed today, what are you most curious to see unfold in Costco's next quarter? Like, what are you going to be watching closely?
That's a good question. For me, I'm really interested in seeing how those membership renewal rates trend, after that fee increase.
Right. Yeah, that's a big one.
And I'll also be watching their e-commerce growth to see if they can, really accelerate their digital strategy.
Good points. For me, I'm curious to see how they handle those potential port strikes.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Can they keep those shelves stocked, especially with the holidays coming up?
Lots of things to keep an eye on.
Definitely. So to our listeners, keep those questions in mind as we wait for Costco's next earnings report. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a, fascinating company or trend.
Until then, happy shopping.
And keep those Costco cards handy.
Mm.
Thanks for joining us.